So yeah, thank you, Leah. I'm actually here, like, kind of to replace Katerina Kirtilova, who just had a baby. So she's very busy, and I'll do my best to try to fill her shoes. She's more of a phenomenologist than I am, but we had some phenomenology earlier in the day, so hopefully that part's been taken care of. And yeah, this talk has, I'll start with a short video clip of Marshall McLuhan from the 70s. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Marshall McLuhan. There's one. What do you know? Canadian. Okay, yeah, Canadian. He's not a philosopher. He's actually comes from the history of literature. And he developed observations about how technologies are transforming society by observing what happened with the Gutenberg press, especially when the introduction of that new information technology in the 15th century. I just, there's some extra sound. There we go. There's a little more prosthesis. I will try to address some of the things that we've been discussing today. And yeah, at the beginning, I'd like to bring this video clip. We did a lot of, we just, Jiyoon Yang and me, we just did a big show on McLuhan in Korea. I'm just back from that, so I'm still very much satisfied with how McLuhan's observations help us address some of the challenges that we're contending with today. So let's take a look at this. I put some subtitles on it. I hope you can see the subtitles, because sometimes he's a little muffly speaking. Let's see if we can do that. Okay. Oh yeah, and he's going to say, there's a couple of mistakes in the subtitle at the beginning, so I hope you'll bear with me. There's he's mentioning simians. Oh, the video went away. Let's see, I'll try it again. Here we go. Can we get this big? Can you see that? Can you see it? Yeah, looks okay, right? Let's hope the sound will work. He mentions Albert Simians. The subtitle might say simian like the monkey, but it's actually Albert Simians. That's just the only error in the subtitle, so you'll see. Okay.
One thing overlooked by Hans Haas is the absence of biological or psychological means of coping with the effects of our own technical ingenuity in creating new organs. The problem is clearly indicated in some simians, in man's presumptuous brain, when he says that when, about 500,000 years ago, man began slowly to embark upon the road to cultural advance, an entirely new situation arose. The use of implements and the control of fire introduced artifacts of which the cortex could avail itself for purposes of living. These artifacts had no relationship whatever to the organization of the body and could therefore not be integrated into the functioning of the brainstem. The brainstem, man's great regulating center, the diencephalon, continued to function just as if the artifacts were non-existent. But as the diencephalon is also the organ in which the instincts are generated, the earliest humans found themselves faced with a very old problem in a new garb. Their instinctive behavior ceased to be appropriate in the new situations which the cortex created by using artifacts. Just as in the pre-mammalian reptiles, the new environment of the trees rendered many ancient reflexes pointless, the new artificial environment which man began to build for himself at the dawn of culture made many of his animal reflexes useless. What Simians is saying is that our natural responses to media and to technology are irrelevant, that we cannot trust our instincts or our natural physical responses to new things. They will destroy us. How are we to bypass or offset the merely physical response to new technology and new environments created by new technologies? This problem has not been raised by anybody, except that we have to live with it every day. Edgar Allan Poe has a story called The Descent into the Maelstrom, which had tremendous influence in the 19th century on the poets and symbolists like Baudelaire and Flaubert and others. In The Descent into the Maelstrom, Poe imagines the situation in which a sailor who has gone out on a fishing expedition is caught by not watching the turn of the tide in a huge maelstrom or whirlpool, and he sees that his boat will be sucked down into this thing. He begins to study the action of the storm. He observes that some things disappear and some things reappear. By studying the things that reappear, to which he attaches himself to one of these, he saves himself. Pattern recognition in the midst of a huge, overwhelming, destructive force is the way out of the maelstrom. The huge vortices of energy created by our media present us with similar possibilities of evasion, of consequences of destruction. By studying the pattern of the effects of this huge vortex of energy in which we're involved, it may be possible to program a strategy of evasion and survival. The survival cannot be trusted to natural response or natural instinct, since the brain stem is not provided with any means of responding to man-made environments. Our diencephalon, our huge evolutionary structure of nerves and brainstem, evolved over long periods of time, was finished, ended its development long before the first technology. Long before fire or clothing, this brainstem had completed its programming. And so with the coming of fire and clothing and weapons, the brainstem is unable to respond relevantly to any of these events. The artist would seem to have been given to us as a providential means of bridging the gap between evolution and technology. The artist is able to program the sensory life or reprogram the sensory life in a way which gives you a navigational chart to get out of the maelstrom created by your own ingenuity. The role of the artist in that regard to man and the media is simply survival.
Okay, so there's a few keywords which are quite fresh still, like with pattern recognition is the way to address, to find the way out of the maelstrom. What he's speaking of as the artist here, he was mentioning Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, who was giving us this metaphoric story about dealing with a very volatile and dangerous situation which is brought on by technological advance and scientific advance, and that's the situation we're in right now. McLuhan suggests that from his analysis that we cannot no longer trust our natural instincts, so our bodies have not evolved to react appropriately to these new, very highly complex environments. And actually, if we trust our physical, natural instincts, then we will be destroyed, and we need to find new ways of responding, observing and responding to the situation. And I think that's like one of the intuitions I had preparing for this talk and thinking about Liet's work and thinking about, for one thing, like knowledge that we're acquiring from very small scales. Like Liet mentioned, one of my doctoral thesis was called Political Economy of the Smallest Things, and it's about the generation of images at the nanoscale, at the chip level, electronic level. And there's one basic problem, very interesting epistemic problem is a scalar problem, because when we're acquiring knowledge at very, very small scales, like Liet is working with, I guess they're SEM or anyway, nanoscopic imagery. Nanoscopic imagery is, of course, nanometer is under 100 nanometers. Nanoscopics under 100 nanometers, and that's invisible to humans. So actually, the images that we get are generated from invisible phenomena. So there's a huge epistemic break there. And actually, like, 1 nanometer is 1/1000th of a meter. I mean, actually to see it with our own eyes, like to see this, requires such an enormous, what's that word? Magnification. You have to expand the image from the data level so many times. It would be the equivalent, like for these images, like at this scale, my body should be 2,000 kilometers tall, right, equivalently, to like have the right proportion to those images, right? Like that's how big this has been magnified in order for us to see it, right? And so to actually deal with that kind of knowledge in a practical way takes a lot of epistemic work, and that's one of the things that artists are helping us like kind of address. So much of our experience today is influenced by data. Well, data is infinitesimal, right? It's electronic. It's valencies, like subatomic valencies in materials on chips, right? I mean, what we see are images and words. That's what we think is data, but actually data are subatomic valencies on chips. They're tiny. They're so small that we can't even use the word tiny. I mean, they're also particle wave duality, so they're not even really completely there. So there's a lot of epistemic work we need to do to translate and understand our condition. And yeah, I mean, here we are grappling and struggling, and it's clumsy and it's difficult, and there's lots of inefficiency about it. But I'm here for the process, and thanks to Leah for inviting me to share a few thoughts. I'll try not to be too downery, but I mean, I am a materialist, and we were talking about it before, about the materiality of computation, and I want to get into some of the problems. Leah also asked me to speak about labor, or the relationship to labor, and I've done a lot of work on that, so I'll try to touch on that quickly. So let me use a slide or two to remind myself what I'm supposed to talk about. Okay, so we are cyborg. We're all cyborg beings. What does that mean? I mean, Cyb is actually the steersman, right? Kubernetes. It's actually doesn't mean anything particularly about mechanized or automated or anything like that, but we're all very, very much influenced by automated systems, by the production of data, especially network computation these days. And it's influencing us in very, very deep ways, as McLuhan is very good at describing. And I put here, cyborg art is the art of survival. So the art that we're making today, the kind of art-science collaboration, I think is really much indicative of the idea that science alone is not going to solve our problems, or is not going to give us the guidance that we need. We need to have some kinds of meta-level synthesis going on, and that's something that artists can provide. Yeah, so they are, yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah, and pharmaceuticals are also cyborg. I mean, a lot of us are struggling with some psychic or mental conditions which require adjustment. That's just normal because the environment is so difficult for our metabolism. I think that if you read the McLuhan statement, it kind of talks to that. I want to talk about the social conditioning of technologies, that we cannot separate the results of what we're producing with technology, and even the conditions under which technologies are invented and then reproduced, from the social conditions of the people who are involved, right? Technologies do not exist without people. Technologies emerge from social needs. We spoke about that before. And they find their meaning in social conditions, right? So technologies operating by themselves don't have any meaning. And unfortunately, all that stuff is very anthropocentric and anthropomorphic, and we can't really get away from that. We have to kind of deal with the anthropic imperative built into technology, and that's what's guiding us to do things, and that's also what's guiding us, like, if we can, to get the best results out of the technological development. Yeah. So the artists do provide various things in this regard. Like, the artists do provide a very good context, like these, where we can get together and discuss some of the challenges that we're facing together and find the vocabularies that we need to contend with the situation. Okay, I'm going to address a couple of points in the EACVA statement from the website. One of the ones was like about what is the status of the creative work in the age of AI and robotics. And I think what we're seeing with now with DeepSeek and the rapid advance of open source affordances in AI is that, yeah, IP is going to be over, right? If regardless of whether, like, OpenAI or the US bans DeepSeek or whatever, like, open source exchange in scientific communities, especially in the realm of AI and augmented research through AI, is just going to overwhelm IP. And I think that we are already seeing that the industries in places which have very strong IP protections are going to start lagging behind, and China is going to go ahead, and other associations that are more open about exchanging intellectual property are going to just overload or just surpass the more protectionist situation. So the IP regime, I think it's very sad, and I think we will have to say goodbye to it eventually. The only reason that IP kind of remains in terms of the protecting, like, copyright for artistic products, like, yeah, creative products, is only because, like, yeah, artists have to survive, and they need to, like, kind of monopolize their own artwork. But hopefully that won't be a problem for too long. I mentioned this problem about nanoscale, epistemic problem, of course. And yeah, I don't know if I need to go more into that. For me, one of the basic problems that we have in like the democratic crisis now, with regard to, like, fake news and like people having trouble dealing with the information that they're grappling with, is really in the fact that data is not well understood, that data the representation of data involves an enormous magnification from the level of the chip. And you know, when you have data on a chip, it's neither black or white or loud or soft, or doesn't have any qualities at all. It's all in the translation from the data to the meta level where we consume the data. And that's what's important. That's what we need to deal with. So all data is kind of, all representations of data is kind of fake. It's all produced for us according to some paradigms that we're supposed to, you know, that are going to try to get us to consume. But it's arbitrary. Let's just want to think a couple of seconds about this. Why are we painting with robots? Of course, like, here we are attaching ourselves to a long canonic history of Western culture production, which involves, like, paintbrushes and paint and canvases. And that has high cultural value. So it does add this kind of allure to the production, of what is essentially like an industrial product. But instead we're using industrial processes to produce things which are akin to those great masters' works from the early days of painting, when we started to cultivate a weird synthesis between science and human aspiration and cultural production and cultural enjoyment. Of course, that was very much in Europe and in the Americas, depending on unacceptable, inhuman suppression of other human beings and extraction from the earth through colonialism. So we have when we have to be careful when we're celebrating or we're enjoying the metaphor of a painting that's made by an automated agent, so-called automated, that we also need to reintegrate the very, very difficult, inhuman pedigree of the Enlightenment project, which paintings are also a part of, right? So we don't think about who mixed the pigments for Vermeer's masterpieces. We don't think about, the Dutch colonial project, which produced the mercantilist environment, a very secular, very advanced, open intellectual environment in Amsterdam at that time was based on brutal suppression of the indigenous people in Indonesia and just merciless extraction of their resources. And you can't separate one from the other, so we need to kind of integrate that in our appreciation of the higher values that we're trying to reach towards, and kind of justify all this whole trajectory now, Certainly, robots can bring us a lot of very big benefits, but we have to see that all the benefits that we've acquired through automation, so-called automation, has been at the price of a lot of people, other people. So what is at stake? We have to look at the sublimation of labor with conservative aesthetics. There's the basic idea is that the last gesture of the laborer is to remove the traces of their labor. So we should not see the traces of the labor, then the work is finished. So all the pedigree, all the legacy of human labor, and of course, if you want to take a feminist position to that, reproductive labor, all like what Maria Mies, a German anthropologist, said, actually all production is women's work and everything else is parasitic on women's work. So, right? And that's, you can see that, everything is built on that, because without women's production, basic production, we don't have anything. And then Silvia Federici will go and use this other term, reproductive labor. Reproductive labor, which is kind of care labor in the home. So we go back to Vermeer painting those masterpieces, but who was taking care of Vermeer, right? Like, how was Vermeer reproduced socially? That's all ignored, right? There's a sublimation of all that labor in a kind of a victory narrative, which reaches its apogee in high technology and AI today. But it's still going on, it's still at the base, that hasn't changed at all. And those basic politics still need to be addressed and integrated in our visions of what we're trying to achieve. So yeah, we haven't gotten out of the, even though we're at the nano level, we haven't gotten out of an industrial paradigm. We're not in a post-industrial situation. If you look carefully, you'll see that it's most industrial, not post-industrial. It's not postmodern, it's most modern. So we gotta deal with some difficult contexts or conditions which haven't changed. These are like old ones, the Benjamin, the sad, very sad Benjamin quote, "There is no document of civilization which is not at the same time a document of barbarism." I can share the slides later if you want to hangout. And okay, so just for a twist at the end, a very good friend of mine, somebody we just invited to Seoul for the McLuhan exhibition, Sarah Sharma, has something called, she's looking at feminist technologics, looking at what kind of built-in logics are, she's also a McLuhanist, by the way, are built into how we understand and what we expect from technological development. And she critiques the point that the bro culture and the dominant culture of technological development compels women to desire what men want from technology, and that women, or their feminist position, could have a radically different vision of a technological future. We see that, this is a very interesting book, Ruth Schwartz-Cohen's More Work for Mother, that's the name of the book. It's a basic thesis of the book is that labor-saving devices actually don't save any labor, and actually women end up working more with every labor-saving device that's introduced into the domestic space. And we have to see that, like in terms of this kind of analysis of placenta in Leah Graver's work, we see that we're in a very Western science specialized attitude towards the body, separating out the placenta from the living context and generalizing it. Of course, placenta is now a very valuable commodity, so we're subordinating the production of placenta to the logic of capitalism. And the logic of capitalism is the logic of patriarchy. So what would be a feminist technologics in this sense? And Sarah Sharma suggests this concept of broken machine, that we try not to be an efficient machine. Instead of trying to do things properly and fit into a kind of ethic of efficiency and fit that morality, we embrace our resistance, we embrace the difficulty we have, and we try to generate dissensus and problems in our discussions and slow things down, maybe. It's a little bit of a sabotage attitude, but you can see that actually using an industrial robot to paint is a bit of a broken machine approach. You know, why are we using an industrial robot to do something so useless? No, I mean, it's not exactly useless because, of course, we were just saying that. Art practice has a place in bringing people together and has a kind of political convening effect. So I guess the last thing I wanted to say, well, there's the imperative to automate. Automate, of course, the word automate is wrong. There is no auto, right? Nothing is moving by itself. Everything is fueled. I'm fueled by food. And we were talking about it before, the computer needs electricity, the robot needs electricity. Where does that electricity come from? Well, it comes from imminent domain over resources and, power plants and Fernwärme and everything. There's no auto. It's really socio-mate, right? Actually, everything is generated by social contexts. So we don't have really automation. I wanted to show you work by an associate of ours, but I think I don't have, I do, because it's here, right? Very short video of some of Gwon Byung-jun's robotics, performance robotics. Let's see. He makes all the robots himself, every part, and buying the parts, and you can see these robots are very expressive in their pathetic.
같은 것들이 또 옆으로 기어다니면서 어떤 큰 애벌레 같이 움직이고 그리고 사람들에게 조금 더 호감을 줄 수 있는 그런
Yeah, so I also see this kind of approach to robotics, where the robots can barely move or barely do anything, but actually when you see them perform, they are even more evocative than a well-performing robot. I want to get rid of that, but I guess we can stop there, and I'm very much interested to hear your whatever resonated with you or anything that you would like to engage with. Let's take some time together and have a bit of a conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Baruch, for indeed a very eclectic talk, throwing up some very inspiring ideas and going to different directions. And there are some points are being touched here. People want to refer to with some questions. Yes, Greta.
Thank you. Yes, I really enjoyed that. I have one comment and one question. So the comment is probably about the thing that you said about painting with industrial robots as being a useless activity. In one way, I totally agree. But I think that's kind of the point of it, because actually by doing that, you point out the brokenness of the existing kind of techno-capitalist hype narratives. Because by doing it, we see the ways in which it is already broken. So we're kind of exposing the brokenness within the technology by doing this pointless activity. I mean, yeah, I'm an artist, so I don't think it's pointless, but you know what I'm saying?
It's like relatively, I mean,
yeah.
that's the weird thing. Techne and art, right? One's the Greek word and one is the Latin word for the same thing, right? Basically, but in English, basically it's something that's not emergent from nature, right? Techne and art are both not emergent from nature. But in English usage, we kind of split them apart, right? Techne became that stuff that's supposed to be efficient and supposed to have a purpose, and art is that which has a more vague social activity, has a direct purpose, right? It's not supposed to.
I think you could also say that techne is the things that are created by men, whereas art are the things, or craft particularly, were the things that were created by women. So, I work a lot with embroidery, and I think that that's a technology and has been for millennia. And also, I think that you can view electronics, particularly this kind of project that you're looking at here, as, or technology, digital technology, you can also see it as craft with electronics.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I had a question as well, which was about, I maybe just wanted to hear a little more about what you were saying about data having no quality and that everything being about translation. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a really short period where we were talking a lot more about big data and what that meant before that term kind of got subsumed into the larger discourse around algorithms and AI. And I feel like a lot of the discussions that were happening at the time around big data and what it actually means, the translation process, how those ostensibly kind of externally, naturally existing sources of information were being translated and manipulated in all these different ways. It's like that just kind of got swallowed whole, and then we started suddenly talking about artificial intelligence, which is, after all, only based on these very flawed, huge data sets. And so when you were talking, I was just kind of wondering, so what does that say, or what does that mean about the age of robotics and AI that we're kind of getting into now? What is that based on then, if all of that is based on data which has no inherent qualities? Am I being clear?
What would your inherent qualities be to describe data? Can you give that? Because it sounds a bit negative what you're describing now, but AI is trained on what collective written records of human history. So it's not data that comes from nowhere or is created from nowhere. There is basically everything
guess that was what I was interested to hear about, because, I mean, yes, there's obviously the sort of whatever was written, but in terms also of, you know, image data sets, those have been tagged by somebody, and what was that person doing a good job? You know, what biases went into that? I mean, this kind of simplistic element I think has been well covered, but I'm kind of interested in hearing more about the idea about data having no qualities and what that says about, you know, I mean, that implies, I think, a very particular house of cards if we're thinking about AI and robotics.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a few levels there, because like when you're talking about like training data for AI, like for something like ChatGPT, we're talking about textual data, but that textual data is actually already a representation of tokens on the level of and even lower, you know, just valencies in the chipset, right? There's sequences of signals, right? And so yeah, I mean, we have when they're training like large language-based data sets, I mean, those need to be digitized and like scanned down and like generated and then made into machine language versions, right? And at that level, they don't really have any quality necessarily. I mean, we were talking about semantic web like 10 years ago or something, where they're supposed to associate actual semantic like meaning elements to bits of data, but that's not really what's going on, and that's not what data is. I mean, on the chip level, right? I mean, we have to be careful about which level we're discussing what data is. So when you're saying there's like a text corpus that we're training language models on, that's already up from the actual, you know, physical materiality on the metal of the data. So there's that level, right? And then there's the question, okay, so what goes into the corpus? So what books did we put into the corpus? Who chose the books? Are they all like, okay, yeah, I mean, one of the things about AI, which is very sad, is that you know, AI and technology in general just holds a mirror up to ourselves. So if there was like racism, misogyny in the past, in the history, it's in the corpus. It's shown to us through the AI, but we don't have the social or cultural techniques developed to deal with that, being faced with that problem. Instead, we just want to say the AI should not be racist, right? Instead of the AI showing that we are still racist, right? We are still misogynist, we are still colonialist, but we don't want to learn from that because we don't have the cultural or social institutions that allow us to manage, to deal with that uncomfortable news, what the AI is just trying to show us. Okay, so like we're not even allowed to see what AI wants to show us, right? I mean, that's why my good friend Dimitri Kleiner says capitalism's too stupid for AI, right? Because like actually what AI is trying to show us now is that we should open source everything, and you know, and then we'll really have a radically new vision of what the world could be, what society could be, but we're not allowed to have that, at least not here. But yeah, I mean, so there's all those questions, so like what goes into the corpus, because we're building AI from corpuses of historical material, and then, you know, you want to put, yeah, and there's really no other solution to improving the results of AI in that sense. If there is like racism and misogyny and homophobia in the society, it will come out in the results of the AI, and it should. The only way to make it not come up in the results of the AI is to reduce the homophobia and misogyny and racism in society, and then the new AI will have less of it.
Thank you for this optimist answer. Any further questions? Yes, Frederic.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to McLuhan. So we had sort of a quote or an emphasis from you on the art or the artist as a savior, in a way.
Providential figure.
So how do you see that role now, because with the discussion we just had? And then I have a second point I'd like to make, but maybe just let's discuss that first one.
Well, I think that I didn't mention it today. I had it in my notes, but I think the role of artists and art is changing, of course, and duly so. I think we don't need the old masters in the same way, and that we need new approaches. And we see so much more like art-science collaboration and like lots of artists working in corporations or in labs and with universities. And that's like artists, in McLuhan's sense, artists have sensed that their role is changing, right? And they need to insert themselves in different places which aren't like the conventional places like museum or, I don't know, painter's studio, but getting out and integrating in other facets of society and being artists there. And with their sensibility, McLuhan's always talking a lot about how artists are so sensitive and they're like attuned to what's changing before anybody else can, get it. And they intuitively move there and they intuitively develop new practices. And these practices are very performative. They're like less related to product. They're more related to engagement in a social context, I think. And so I don't know. I mean, that's I guess McLuhan never says like look at the art, like look at artwork. He always says look at what artists are doing, right? Like look at how they're behaving to get a guide of like what's coming.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it might be related, but I was thinking you had a discussion point of this tension with technology, that there's sort of a response to power structures who sort of make technology emerge. But then I was thinking art and patterns was mentioned by McLuhan, has been with us well before we had these social structures or capitalism to begin with. So we can go back tens of thousands of years. We have the cave paintings, for example, which are amazing. So isn't there a more profound role for this aspect of art as patterns and sort of representation of meaning, perhaps, which is at another level than the level we're discussing?
What other level would that be?
More fundamental about all of us, that we need art to make sense of the world. Forget about social structures.
Well, I don't think art has a monopoly on sense-making or meaning-making. We make meaning every day with the people around us, right? We're kind of synthesizing our experiences and exchanging with each other. Are you thinking like more universal meaning? Like
I'm thinking,
love thy neighbor?
How do we learn when we're infants?
Yeah, well, that happens ad hoc, right? Happens every day. It's like a process, right? Doesn't finish either. Art can have a role in that, but it isn't. I mean, obviously it does, but maybe not art as art.
If I maybe can jump into this conversation just from...
This is for you, Leah.
I'm not sure it's
for me. The whole event is for you.
But I'm just have the thought of what I think, if I understand Frederic correctly, and his question, and like this trying to define art. when you talked about the social role of the artist, I think this is going back as well to what Greta has talked about using industrial robots in an artistic process. It's in a way of resistance. And this is maybe going as well what you referred for McLuhan of what artists are doing or how they behave. It's about trying to build or to respond to whatever is happening in order to make it sense, or in order to bring forward or to resist or to redefine a lot of the elements that already exist. But this is only one form of art, because in the end, it's how you define it or what it's for and what the purpose of it, because there are many, I think, ways of how can one define art. But the interesting element that you talked about, the old mastered era, which I think relate in, and then I'm making my own jump, equivalent in the modern capitalist society into the, let's say, the gallery artist, that you can monetize the success of it. But when we're going into the art as a social practice, and we're going back to what Frédéric was talking about, the cave painting, for example, or as a social activity that we as a society create in order to bring meaning or to purify meaning to our everyday life, then it becomes a very different aspect when we look into the creation of it in collaborative work, for example, with research institution, with an agency of a piece of technology, because you're kind of taking away the agency from this individual artist, this genius figure that we really like to see in the Western society, and you move it into something that reflects on a social structure. This meaning creation has become a reflection of a group trying to purify an idea with a lot of extended agencies that are coming from, if it's from computational power, it's collected data that can arrive from different kind of facets to agencies of mechanical operation, die by a machine, and therefore as well by the people who program that machine or the manufacturer of that machine. As we learned before, every robot is different, and you cannot apply everything to all robots. So if I can take this to conclude this session, and okay, one last then question there, and then we take a break. So yes, Manuel.
While we're moving to the question, I mean, it's also like in art sciences, you often see that, I mean, one of the great, I don't know, contributions to knowledge production with the artists in the art science context is that you have a way to overcome disciplinary distinctions between the collaborators, right, in the art science, in the lab, right? So, and also the secondary part is that you generate aesthetic products which people can attend to from a wide range of disciplinary backgrounds and also from the public. And they can meet specialists through the artwork. Like the public meets the specialist through the artwork. Exactly.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to add to the conversation from the perspective of artist and behavioral evolutionary biologists, in a sense. This gentleman, I don't remember his name, that you presented first with the nice hair standing to the side.
McLuhan, yeah.
Marshall, okay. He comes from a time when the idea of what is cultural, what is natural, was understood as this dichotomy, as this sort of thing that we need to kind of, I don't know, live with, because we evolved and evolution was sort of finished beforehand, and so now we are coping with things that are totally unnatural and our instincts can't deal with. And what's so nice with recent decades in medical research and whatever, we figure out that things we might have labeled as diseases or things that stray from what is the norm are actually probably the functional psychological mechanisms that show a range of motion, reactions, a range of things. And also another example from that time in behavioral biology where, for example, looking at animals, we thought, okay, mating behavior comes from the males because the females, they will then just see what the displays are and they will decide. And recently it has been shown that in most animals it is actually the other way around. It's females are sort of initiating. And so their time of society has an idea how we understand meaning when we might get the facts totally wrong. And so I think we should focus a bit more about that we are not so longer in a species that was in a form of prehistoric natural state, and now we are so far removed from that. I think culture is part of our biological makeup, and the way that culture changes the earth through architecture, through destruction, through whatever, is also part of our biological fingerprint. And for example, how to prove or how to illustrate that point, the idea that there's an ozone layer comes with a bloom in green algae in the history of life billions of years ago that had more oxygen released into the atmosphere. So life changed conditions of life on Earth. And of course, we're doing it in a very destructive way, which is super critical, but it's just part of our biological species conditions, isn't it?
I think one thing I like to emphasize, though, despite the fact that we are transfused by all kinds of life world and quantum effects, and we are, not only merely ourselves. The conditions under which we come together to discuss these things are socially determined and affected by political and social economic conditions, and we need to make those more inclusive to have a better result.